Okay, thanks. So when we're starting this panel, Antti, John, and I were discussing how to make it fun, and assuming that most people here in this room will not be in gaming, and we came up with this angle. And so let's just start. And John, a couple words about yourself, Homa Games.
So yeah, I'm John. I remember when we were here this time last year, we were literally just starting out. There's a few of us in Paris, and it's really cool to be back. We've got 2 of the team here this year, which is incredible. But yeah, we're fast forward 12 months. We see ourselves we're trying to be in the next wave of hyper casual. So the first wave came, Flappy Bird, some incredible studios and publishers that built the category. We saw an opportunity to be part of the next wave and do something different, and we'll talk about that in our panel. But yeah, fast forward 12 months, we've had like 4 #1 hits around the world, 60 million plus installs, 25 plus people in Paris now. And we've got 15 open roles. If anyone wants to get into hyper casual, come talk to us afterwards. I'm really excited to be here with our partners Tenjin to talk about all things hyper casual.
Antti.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Antti Hattara. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Starberry. We're based here in Berlin. Rewind 12 months, I was pitching a hyper-casual game to John here at the same conference. And then, so we developed Idle Coffee Corp. We then went through a bunch of hyper-casual publishers, signed with Boombit Games. The game was launched May this year. We've done 5 million downloads now, and so I'm kind of representing the other end of the table on hyper casual or casual.
Cool, awesome. And I'm with Tenjin, and we're here because we offer tools and training, and pretty much most people in hyper casual use us. So we have, I think, a good understanding what's going on. And so, but like the question is like, I think like we get asked often, like how big is hyper casual? And I don't think people understand it. Like for a practical session, just go to the App Store, go to the free charts. Pretty much everyone in the top 10 will be hyper casual, and this happened, right? It's a big wave which came into the world around 2-3 years ago. And this is some numbers. I don't think people understand how big it is. Like a lot of in our industry is actually stagnating, but this thing has came up as a volcano. Just to give you an understanding how big this is, and the argument is that there's a lot of innovation happening on all kinds of parts of a stack, which enables this. Cool. So the idea is like, and it will be just back and forth between all of us, is I asked both of them to come up with 4 points, like on what these pieces of innovation could be. So let's just start. Here's some of the ones from Antti. Here will be some of the ones of John. So testing. You both talk about testing.
Yeah, for sure. So hyper-casual, like from a game developer perspective, that's something that came completely as a surprise. I don't think anyone believed that low CPIs, like they were a thing in the past, and casual games would be overthrown by mid-core and higher LTV, higher CPI. So I think one of the big learnings or kind of things that revelation for a developer is that you need to be testing way earlier than you could even imagine or have the courage to. From developer perspective, you're kind of afraid of that. But hyper casual turns things upside down. You're testing even before building, and a big thing I think on that is the real kind of KPIs that you get from real action testing, that actually building something that looks like real. It's actually tested with real UA. Real apps, they might be undercover in a way that they're in Google Open Beta or different publisher accounts or things like that, but you're actually testing the real deal. So that for me definitely is a key takeaway.
Yeah, I think testing sounds like an obvious thing, but if you think about when hyper-casual started, or when I talk to people not from hyper-casual, Flappy Bird is always the reference point, but they just kind of look at you like, come on, it's just like a few dudes in their bedroom making games, making loads of money. Like, isn't that what hyper casual is all about? And perhaps it was earlier on, but now in our studio, like, we have a lot of fun, but there is no room for emotion, right? Exactly what Antti just said. You test everything. We don't do anything unless the data tells us that it's the correct decision to do. And we were laughing about this earlier. Like, if you get emotional in hyper casual, you will fail. So it's incredible now that we will, even before we go into development, I mean, there's some incredible partners in the room that you can just basically build a game in a video unit and you can test it on real users. They don't even know that they're not playing a game. And within a couple of days, we'll have real users and we'll know whether we'll kill it or potentially go into development. So we test everything from game design, creatives. We have some incredible brainstorms internally where we're trying to kind of challenge ideas and concepts that a partner may have brought to us. So it's such an exciting space because we don't like playing by the rules in hyper casual. We like to create our own rules. We like learning, but we try and even test what other hyper casual studios are doing. We don't just think because they're doing it, their game's top 10, it's going to work for us. So testing is inherent in the hyper casual industry.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll just illustrate the point a little bit from some of the observations I have. So what you can imagine is, like, often imagine you have 30 ads and the ads are kind of a tutorial and you have just like a very bare bones game of 5 levels of anything. And you don't know, even like you have not developed the concept, maybe it's even black and white. And you, depending on the metrics in the ads, you actually start developing the game. But it also comes up with interesting effects. Like, you need to find the right ad. And like, we have clients who have fantastic games and they never release them. They're like a very investseller because they never found the creative which fits for the model. And this is, I think, something like the mid-core gaming doesn't understand. Like, they also don't understand how different the tech stack is. They don't understand how different your processes are in your companies, who these people are, how they interact with the wider group. This is, I think, in the whole organization, something different, right?
Yes, it's such a good point. If you, like, friends that work in even like casual games, right? You have this luxury of AAA games. You just like launch for 6 months, give a bunch of money to Facebook, Google, kind of sit back, let them do some optimizations and come back in 6 months and like look at your retention. And I'm like, that sounds like really cool. It's like being back at uni, right? Whereas for hyper casual, I kind of feel there's a complete reversal. I'm not sure if he's in the room, but I was having lunch with another studio yesterday and we kind of arrived at the point that one of the most exciting things about hyper casual is we are now driving the technology agenda versus other games categories are kind of beholden to the tech that's out there. And guys like Tenjin, I mean, didn't exist until hyper casual came along. So it's really great that we are now able to create new technology in partnership with people like Tenjin to basically cater for this billion-dollar industry that didn't exist. So for us, I mean, forget 6 months, we're literally looking on a minute, hourly, daily basis. And if it's not working, we kill it.
But like, let's illustrate this for you, Antti. Like, you're talking about 12 months ago, you had this conversation with John. Suddenly you're, doing this, probably not knowing what you're doing 80% of the time. So how did you stumble in that? What was your learning curve or discoveries here on that part?
On which part?
On the testing and testing early on ads and having like a bare bones games. Usually a game developer feels proud, right? You want to have polished products, right? Just give us a little bit color and a bit like how you felt as well.
Sure. Yeah. So we were a team of 5 and everyone from a game development background pretty much. So I kind of took the marketing hat on and tried doing UA and marketing and all the business stuff on my end. So for us, it was, of course, I kind of went on a bunch of the meetings with the guys trying to learn what should I do, paid a bit of attention to the hyper-casual scene otherwise. And actually, when I kicked off the Facebook marketing manager tool, I just actually pretty much took whatever I saw other guys doing, the noob versus pro. These creatives created my own video from our game and actually just put it live on Facebook and saw what came out. So it was was kind of a learn by imitation or inspiration tactic, which I think in hyper casual is quite effective as well.
It is, right? You have this Facebook tool where you can see other game publishers' ads. All the people in hyper casual like staring at this tool more than the App Store charts. It's like their religion to look at it.
But I'd maybe highlight still that like now 12 months after, we're looking into our next game, and the key milestone is the validation, the testing, that how early can we test. And of course I'm pushing with a team of game developers who are the proud guys who don't think it's ever ready for testing. You first build the full game, polished, and then we can test.
So illustrate that. Like another point you have is add creative iteration, simple and cheap but effective, follow trends. What does that mean? Give us examples.
Yeah, that's maybe kind of the as how the industry works as a whole on hyper casual from at least like my perspective. So the Facebook ad library, the kind of speed of the companies jumping onto these effective new types of ad creative. So I guess hyper casual as a whole is pushing way faster forward compared to a lot of traditional mobile games UA, because everyone's maybe also watching fairly closely what others are doing, testing them out fast, and then iterating on those. So I guess this is why we've seen these things kind of pick up. And
John, you say something similar. Don't be bound by the rules. What hyper casual is now will not be the same as 6-12 months. I think it's a slightly similar argument. Could you talk about like how maybe what like genres we see now versus like 6 months ago, 9 months ago? I don't think people understand how quickly this thing is.
Yeah, I think one of the questions you get asked a lot, which really sets the tone for a meeting, is if someone says, I can't find hyper casual in the App Store, it kind of sets the tone for the meeting. So I think that's why it's exploded, because hyper casual just pervades every app category. So what we're seeing now is there's been an explosion of studios and publishers and developers in hyper casual, but we're starting to see them kind of actually specialize in certain genres of hyper casual built around the classic App Store category. So there's guys that make amazing puzzle games, sports games, racing games, even family games in hyper casual, because the category is so big now that it can support these specialisms. But in terms of like testing the rules, on the creative point, I think you mentioned like 30 creatives. I would probably go with a number like 100 creatives, for example. And that's where we have to challenge the rules, because for hyper casual, unlike other genres, we can probably get away like UK, US in terms of like language and creative. But, like Asia, for example, we are constantly testing on a daily basis hundreds of different examples of language, of color, like putting certain landmarks in ads in China versus Korea versus Japan. I don't think people understand the kind of sheer creative operation that goes on behind the scenes in hyper casual. And I think for me, one of the most exciting advancements in hyper casual, and something that we've been working on internally now, is it is a creative idea, right? But even with a live game, we can have different versions of a live game in any country being played by real users, so that even the developers will hate this, but even once the game is live, we are still continually testing the game itself, core elements through our SDK. And if we see something that is going to increase like LTV or decrease CPIs in Malaysia, we'll make that change. Like, there's not really much of a conversation with the developer. We're literally going on the data. So I think it's also been really interesting working and partnering with developers to see how that mindset has changed and really kind of embraced hyper casual as like, who are these arrogant hyper casual guys that think they know everything about game development, to actually realizing that we're just basing it off data. It's not personal. We're not looking at your game going, oh, it's a rubbish game, it's not going to work. We're all about supporting publishers and making great games, but also running a business, right, and driving profit. And you can only do that if you have a partnership and base it on the data. So I think that's really changed.
That's a good point on the continuum of, in 2010, free-to-play game came kind of into the games industry. I was product management, so game designers hated product managers because suddenly business was part of game design. Now I guess today then already marketing is part of the game design. So it's just the continuum, and now I'm in the middle.
So, and that of course is driven by tons of automation, right? On all the layers, just from the creative. You just talked about like live ops, in-game management. Could you give other examples of areas where I think hyper casual is usually much more advanced than most of the studios out there?
Sure. So I think again we take it for granted, but just so in other genres, you'll look at you'll take a creative within a particular publisher, you'll look at total number of users, you'll do some quick maths, and you'll work out the value of that publishing creative. For us, working with Tenjin, Mopub, Iron Source, everything we do is at the user and impression level, right? And that goes from like game design and game experience. Part of the reason we do that from a monetization perspective is, it's a lot of manual work for our team, and we are working on automating that. But we believe certainly in the short term, from a monetization perspective, we want to control that so that we can actually deliver the best game experience and therefore monetization experience at an individual player level.
So, John, let me stop here and illustrate it to the room. So, you guys know that Iron Source launched user level a year ago, then app level with bids, then Mopub with impression level. And I think the key, the first generation of companies actually using that and in a way more advanced is other hyper casual. I think Homa Games is the first company which has Mopub for life, and they are developing also together all kinds of tests and use cases around it, and there's a big fight to be much more granular, to have much more transparency. And much more control, and it unearths all kinds of new use cases because of the competition and because of the growth we are seeing in the industry.
So yeah, the basic, I wasn't sure if you're going to flick up one of your 100 slides to illustrate it, but the basic concept is at a user level is we can bid for user A within app A at one specific price, and the same user in another app, we set the bid level at a different price because we can see that our data is telling us that those are the correct bid levels to have, rather than just a blanket bid for a certain cohort or even a certain user across an entire network. So that's at a simple level really what we're talking about. But as a result, we live and die by, LTV, of course, it's important, and CPI, but have you got a slide on IPM in there? I can't remember what you...
I do, but let's just talk.
Okay, so does everyone know what IPM means? No, okay. So again, in hyper-casual, I kind of argue this is possibly the most important thing that we now look at that actually no one's ever heard of. So it's basically installs per 1,000 impressions. So I'll give you some context. If you're a casual game developer, you'll probably get, I think the Iron Source stat is 4 per 1,000 impressions. In hyper-casual, we get 40 per 1,000 impressions. So what that means is we're basically 10x casual game developers in terms of installs we're getting per 1,000 impressions, which is the real challenge for casual game developers because it means we can absolutely compete with them in the waterfall on eCPMs, but we're getting 10x the returns on that. So when we're testing games early on, that's actually one of the key stats that we're looking at. That there are some, if any of you guys, if you don't subscribe already to Eric's newsletter, read Mobile Dev Mode, there's some great content on that, but it's a really important metric that outside of hyper-casual, and I expected that response, no one really knows. So it comes back to my point about hyper-casual creating new rules. We were well, that doesn't work for us, so we're just going to create our own standard. If you're in casual games, you'll know it, but again, you can probably see the difference in technology and market size between 4 and 40. I'm not talking 4 and 5, we're talking about a 10x difference. So yeah, I'm not going to claim to be the brains. Our brains are sitting over there. So if anyone wants to have an in-depth discussion about IPM, then go talk to Ebba or Gonzalo afterwards.
Yeah, and maybe just to add one input from my end as well. I think what we're also coming into is a chaos of world of what ad revenue actually means, or LTV. What we're seeing is we're now Iron Source old API is different than Iron Source user level. And you have discrepancy depending on which data point you have. So and they're easily 20%. And across all the vendors. And so I think we'll, as an industry, come to a point where you will not say it's like LTV, but you will need to name the vendor and the level of granularity. And often that early on, I think it was a lot of pushed by Iron Source user level and app level, because if you bid on site ID, and their level, then people saw a 20% opt-out jump. So they don't care really what's way how to calculate it or how it used to be a year ago or 2 years ago. We do whatever it takes to increase the ARPDAU. And I don't think these kinds of innovations and things, I don't think people see that outside of our little bubble.
Yeah, and that's why this is really interesting panel, because you've got both sides of hyper-casual, but I think you'd be getting quite a heated discussion around this if you had like a casual developer or like a AAA game like publisher or developer in the room.
So let's talk about these monetization opportunities. Antti, you talk about video ads, fast payout cycle. Please explain.
Yeah, it's kind of ties into the ad LTV, which was mentioned just a second ago. So yeah, I guess as a surprise for games developer, the potential that you can make actually enough money with video ads only to be able to acquire users was like unheard of. So I think that's just a high level learning when looking at what happened on the games industry with hyper casual. So maybe
did it change how you build your games or how you think about it?
Yeah. So now, that kind of gave us the model that, hey, we're going to go for ads plus IAP, and the ads are going to first support us to get a game, and it's going to make money already when we launch it, and we can hopefully then build on the game and add IAP monetization and get the game for a longer life cycle than supporting the IAP. But
talk more from this video and first-time user experience design, right? I think what people also like in the old world, you have a lot of the ads on creatives are brand, right? And I think the ads in hyper-casual are very different. They're much more like a tutorial. It's not about the logo or the name of your company. The user needs to get immediately the dynamic. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so there must have been a change in the consumer kind of perception or behavior that these very clear gameplay communication videos are highly effective, leading into these IPMs that you want to see to be able to effectively market your game. So that's, of course, something that I think has already changed on the consumer level, that there's a demand for different type of ads that I, as an old guy, am used to these fancy game ads with high 3D, and you're probably looking at the game ads where the game's not going to look like that. This is not real gameplay footage, but it's cool. And so I'm going to download the game. But nowadays, it's some colors on the screen, and it's probably going to tell you that, can you reach level 10? So it's already giving you the first quest or the kind of mission on your game. It's probably the tutorial, so you know what to expect from the game. You know how to play it because you've been looking at 30 seconds of someone playing it, the noob versus pro style. And when you get into the game, you're going to have one click and you're in the game. So this, and I would say within 5 to 10 seconds, you've already watched one video ad for sure.
I think the answer lies, if you take a step back in terms of game design and video ads, is a hyper-casual audience don't identify as gamers. So if you remember that, we're not building video ads for a gaming audience. We're building video ads, it's like Netflix, for a mass global consumer audience. So for us, playables drive around 80% of our revenue, right? And to Antti's point, because we're not building ads for gamers, those ads don't need to look like incredibly sophisticated gameplay where you've got to show off all these kind of deep levels of the game, because that's not our target audience, right? Just look at consumer advertising. So our ads need to be incredibly simple, represent the gameplay as accurately as possible, and make them understand it's like one tap. It's the concept of hyper-casual, how easy it is to play the game. So they watch the ad, they're like, yeah, I can play that. I'm playing it already. This is cool. I'm addicted. I want to download it. They download it, and the cycle keeps perpetuating. But in terms of, you kind of made a comment earlier, it's interesting to see how that's changed, right? Because the obvious place for hyper-casual developers to go fishing for hyper-casual users is other hyper-casual games. But we are seeing, certainly in our games, I'd say it's about 30% now, non-gaming ads are coming from the term brand performance ads. So a Twitter or a Spotify that are looking to drive not an install, but some sort of subscription. And that's really changed in the past 6 months. And I can only assume the reason we're seeing more of them is because those ads are backing out in terms of paying subscribers, which to me makes sense because I think if you fast forward 12 months, you're probably going to see a 50-50 split once all these brands realize that hyper-casual is a mass marketing consumer channel. It's not this billion-dollar games industry. It should just be on their, on their media plan, just like they go and buy, like Sky Sports or ESPN, for example.
Yeah, we have all kinds of debates, of course, internally as well. I think there's like 100 million of kids out there, and the way how they gain trust is very different. It's not for brand; they just want to see what to get. It's like this YouTube style, and we see a lot of it, like ad formats actually drive what trust is and what interaction is. And like right now, for example, TikTok, right? like what is this, right? But people are actually like creating TikTok ads and then a TikTok type of experience, and the way how you gain trust and how you're authentic, how you communicate, all of that is very different, right?
There's a super important point on that when it comes back to creative, because you mentioned TikTok, and that's another thing our team are fantastic at. And you'll see in hyper-casual is it's not just about the creative, it's the creative by channel. So what's going to work for us on TikTok is totally different to Snap, for example, or totally different to Reddit or working with influencers, and that's a really important point.
Yeah, I think hyper-casual, like the larger studios, they have like dedicated different creative teams for channels, right? Like and technology just around the channel, which is fascinating, which people don't know. And a lot of innovation is coming from the memes and from all the things the kids are doing. And I don't think like the game industry, like in general, doesn't think about that as much as hyper-casual do.
It just comes back to my point about understanding your consumer, because again, for TikTok, if you understand the type of content people want on TikTok, it's not too difficult to understand that your ad should look like the content I'm already engaging. It's like native ads, right? That's really, so if you just think about it like that, it's incredibly simple. And yet, I mean, for us, Balls versus Lasers, we were, just chilling out over the weekend, and all these alerts started going off internally, like what is happening? Installs were going through the roof. And it was basically because someone loved our game, put a piece of content on TikTok, and in like Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, it's just like lighting up across Asia. So you can't underestimate the power of these new networks. And for us, TikTok, given historically how closed China has been, TikTok is playing a large part now in really opening up the Asian market for hyper-casual.
Yeah, and personally, I see it swapping into non-games, like insurance companies having dedicated channels for TikTok, and driving a lot of actually their users into that. What else? Like, how much time do we have? So we know. 90 seconds. Cool. Any questions? Feedback, inputs?
You said you have 10x IPM of a casual game. Why do you think it is? I mean, because casual games, they are casual as well. So what makes it 10x? Because for me, I'm midpoint, don't get me wrong, so it's even higher than that. But it would be interesting why a casual game and a hyper-casual game, which from my perspective, seems still simple to explain and simple to communicate. Why is there 10x?
So it comes back to this audience point. You will be bidding on a very specific type of audience. So I'd imagine your Facebook campaigns look very different to ours. For hyper-casual, our starting point is we want to buy as many users as possible. There is a sweet spot, kind of 18 to 44, but actually, we've just done a bit of a review, but actually it goes from not that you can necessarily track, but it could be anywhere from like your 5-year-old daughter to your grand. That's how broad we're talking. So I think if you look at it then from a price point and CPIs, we're trying to buy users for like 20 cents, right?
But why is the difference between a casual game, which still is super open? A casual game can be from 8, 6, 7 to high.
So I would argue that it's not similar at all. If you look at the percentage of IAP versus ads in a casual title, it's totally different to the ad mechanics of hyper casual. And it really, I would, our audience is totally different. Casual games are not mass market. Obviously, Candy Crush is people defer to, but I wouldn't say that is a mass market game. So those IPM differences come back to like mass market audience, CPIs. the mechanics of monetization within your game. We've spoken about ad formats. I think if you roll all of that up together, that's why there's such a drastic difference.
Antti, how do you answer that as a newly religiously, you changed just religion from mid-core to this, so how would you answer that?
Yes, I think the best concepts have that 40x or the 40 IPM. So you're looking for those, and I think if you test 100 hyper-casual games, you're going to be looking at a lot that are in the low 10s, and then the best ones that you want to be kind of putting your effort on are in the 40s. I think it's just about there's like this mass consumer demand, and also kind of, I would say in the last 12 months, it was also about the supply and demand. So if you create an ad for a match 3 game, you're competing with already, I don't know, hundreds of millions of spend compared to these.
I'm getting nods from up there. Thank you guys for this panel.